welcome back to the block. We're here with W.B. Garvey talking about his book, Panama Fever, Digging Down Gold Mountain. And we're going to get into the meat of the matter right now. Mr. Garvey, this book is dedicated to unsung heroes, the unsung heroes. Tell me some of these unsung heroes. Can you mention a few?
Well, the unsung heroes are basically the workers themselves. I made the characters in the book sort of represent the kind of idealists, the young people, because most of the guys who went were fairly young.
Yes.
They thought they were going to make their fortunes there. And I call them heroes because of the fact that we think of heroes like soldiers going to war. They're heroes, you know. They're sacrificing for their country. Well, I consider those Jamaicans who left knowing, you have to understand, people knew it was going to be a dangerous job, yet they left anyway. One of the reasons I used that poem in the beginning about Isaac Park gone to Colombo going to kill that boy is because it wasn't that they were so naive as to think that it was going to be easy, but they believed in this project, and it was presented themselves in such a way that they believed they were doing heroic work, because when the Suez Canal was built during the 1850s in Egypt, that was considered an incredible achievement for its time in terms of engineering. It got a lot of press because nobody thought it was going to succeed. And it's ironic because the fact that it succeeded against all odds was one of the reasons why they wouldn't realize in this case of Panama that you couldn't do the same technique in Panama.
I see. And they actually uses the same guy who built the Suez Canal.
Ferdinand de Lesseps.
Yes.
He was in charge of the Panama project, and because he wouldn't change the plan, all these people died unnecessarily.
You start the book with this remarkable scene of these young men getting into Panama. Start off with these expectations, come happily, you can see sickness and things, and then they get, once they cross the water and they touch the landscape, you have them looking at these huts like gold, roof of gold, and they're perceiving this brilliant place, and then they get there and the reality strikes them. And so there is, very early in your book, you set up everybody for this sort of loss of expectations. Is this a central theme throughout the book?
Exactly. This is what I wanted to drive home. And it's interesting in that the actual facts line up perfectly, because there was an earthquake not long after some of the recruits arrived. But the idea of that is that, yes, they went with a lot of hope and imagination and drive, and immediately they're confronted with tremendous, catastrophes, challenges to overcome. And it's what I admire about having read some of the letters that survive from that period is the tremendous pride they took, at the beginning at least, in sticking to the job, because they were determined they were going to succeed in this thing. They didn't want to go back and just say, all right, we tried and we couldn't do it. They wanted to show the world, because there was this question of whether, black labor was as good as Irish labor and Chinese labor. So that was an element in it too.
What kind of Jamaicans went? What level of education? What class?
All classes went.
All classes went.
Majority of the folks that went were poor. There's no getting around that. But also, a lot of the guys that went were skilled. A lot of them were, college education. When we say college, high school, they had high school education, because there was nothing for them in Jamaica. They had nothing, very little outlet.
So, strange word, uninhabitably different was Panama from what they were coming from. What were the surprises that they found?
Well,
these young Jamaicans.
Well, first of all, as soon as they got there, an earthquake shook them up. And then, of course, the torrential rains. We have rain in Jamaica, but compared to Panama, it's like a drizzle. When it rains in Panama, it's torrential, and it comes almost out of nowhere. All of a sudden, you're working, and you see all of a sudden, I show that right at the beginning of the book. The sky is blackened like in minutes, and then all of a sudden, you're caught out in this downpour that just drenches, soak you to the skin. And then, 5 minutes later, it's hot as blazes. This is the middle of the tropical jungle. It's heavy. You just multiply Jamaica's heat by 2, and you get a sense of what it was like to work there. So that is that. Then you have the diseases. You have yellow fever, which is spread by mosquitoes, as we know now, which they didn't know back then. Some people knew. It was interesting because there was this American Actually, he was English, but he lived in Alabama. His name was Africanus King. And he knew that mosquitoes spread yellow fever. Unfortunately, his solution was to put gauze around the cities to keep the mosquitoes out. And of course, people laughed at this and they said, that's a crazy idea.
To sit with gauze.
Right, how are you going to, that's impractical.
Yes.
So they just said, oh, this guy's not, he's off his head. But he was right about one thing. He was right that the mosquitoes were the cause. And the problem for the French was the way they were digging. They were trying to dig at sea level, which means they were leaving these huge holes in the ground. And when it would rain, as I said, it would fill up with water and the mosquitoes just breed. So they were contributing to, even as bad as the yellow fever problem was in Panama before, while they were there, it multiplied.
How many Jamaicans died in that first phase?
We figure around 20,000.
20,000
20,000. And when you consider the whole population at that time was about 800,000.
Over a period of what? Over
the period about, not even 10 years, we're talking about 6-7 years.
20,000 Jamaicans died on the job.
Died on the job. And the sad thing is that their burial place, there's a burial place for them. It's a huge, huge cemetery. It's just run down now. And my contacts in Panama, they're wonderful folks down there. They're trying to rehabilitate the cemetery. They've gotten it, fortunately, they have gotten the World Monuments Fund to pay some attention, and they're getting some money to refurbish it and honor these folks who gave their lives for that canal.
Did you find any stories that you couldn't put in that book? You have those untold stories, powerful stories that you just...
You mean they were too painful to put in the book?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that this experience.
I try to at least allude to everything that I discovered. I didn't want to make it melodramatic, but I wanted to have the reader to have a sense of the tragedy that it was and how it affected these folks that were there.
When you write a book like this, an historical novel, you have a responsibility to maintain time and place. It's very important in a historical novel. What are the challenges you found in doing that in this book?
Well, the time and place was not a problem as such. What was a problem was trying to reconcile conflicts in reporting. Because depending on what side was viewing an issue or who the viewer was, you can interpret an event several ways. Or, for instance, sometimes there will be conflicts as to time and place, to get back to your original point. There is one section, for instance, where there is a raid on the barracks in which some renegade Panamanian soldiers come and slaughter a bunch of Jamaicans. And in some accounts, it was just because there was a circus and everybody was sort of having a good time and they got drunk and so forth. But I consider that a cover-up excuse. I think it was a deliberately planned assault on those Jamaicans. There's events that led up to that led me to believe logically that this was an outgrowth of the political unrest that was going on. But, when people report things, particularly back then, the bias slips into the reporting.
And when you present this text, I mean, the historical facts are one, but I mean, in your research, let's look at language, for instance.
Right.
Where you're challenged by the language, when I see something here written and coming out of the mouth of a young 18-year-old Jamaican, am I to believe that is exactly how they spoke at that time?
Right.
Or is it, how much of that did you get, and how did you get it?
What I tried to do in writing this book was use as much as I could of the kind of vernacular and speech and approach that one would see being written and reported in the newspapers or in letters or so forth. I tried to be really, authentic in the way I put the words in the mouth of these folks. Yes. But it is, it's a work of imagination. Let's not get away from that. It is a novel. It is not a historical document.
Okay.
It is a novel. And what inspired me was the situation, the circumstances that these people were in. I was interested in how these characters, which I hope represent, some of not all, but some of the motivations for them to go there. I wanted to see how they respond under pressure.
How much of this book is fact? Is it layered on a bed of facts? Or
it's completely layered on facts.
Okay.
As my friends in Panama said, boy, you didn't have to make up much. It's true. I didn't have to make up anything. All of these things that the characters experience happened.
Okay.
These are not none of the events that affect them that they respond to the earthquakes, the sickness, the attacks on them, the summary executions that occurred. All these things happen. These are facts. I just put characters in those situations.
So you just create characters.
I create characters to show how people might have responded under those conditions.
When the British, when the Americans took over, you haven't gone that phase yet.
That's not in this book.
Talk about that, but no.
Let's not jump ahead of ourselves. There's lots in this to discuss.
They had to make some sort of arrangements. Did these guys ever get a handle on the medical elements of this thing? Or did the other Jamaicans survive?
Well, the Jamaicans were very smart because at the beginning, when they'd go into hospital, they might go in with a head wound and get sick. In fact, one of my characters, that happens to him, he doesn't get a head wound, but he gets an injury. And he goes into hospital and ends up getting sick. So they would see these things, and some of these people would go into someone going into hospital, no, come out. So they would not go into the hospital. Of course, this did not please the French because they had built a wonderful hospital.
Yes.
But a lot of the Jamaicans wouldn't go in because they knew there was something happening. Well, what was happening was the mosquitoes were in the hospital. So you were a sitting duck.
Yes, I see. What do you want us to take from this book? What do you want us to take? What do you want young people to take from
I
this book?
want people to understand two things. First of all, that our contributions are profound and wide-ranging, not just with the Panama Canal, but with the building of the whole 20th century that we take for granted, that a lot of it's built on our backs. But the Panama Canal sort of epitomizes the greatest sacrifices that Jamaicans have made. We should apologize to no one about that history. And also I want to show the resilience of the Jamaicans. When you go anywhere in the world, you'll find a Jamaican. And oftentimes you'll find a successful Jamaican. And I want to inspire the young people to say, you know what, even though I may face incredible odds, if I stick to it, I'm going to make it. I'm going to succeed.
Well, you know that the Panama Canal is being expanded again, and we expect that the Caribbean will benefit a lot because of transshipment, a lot of ships coming through to Jamaica. Is that any sort of retribution? Is there anything any good in that?
We'll have to see.
We'll have to see.
This is the thing about idealism. It doesn't always work out the way you expect. There are benefits. For instance, there are benefits in the sense that there are many who went to Panama who actually went out and branched off and went up to New York afterwards. Like Claude McKay, for instance, worked in Panama.
Oh, he was?
Yes. Eric Walrand worked in Panama. So yes, you can take any experience
and get something good
and
from
get
it.
something good from it.
WB.
Yes.
WB.
All right.
We can talk about this book, the next book, there's so much to say.
It is.
But we have to read all the book. We have to read the book and get what is in it.
That's right.
Thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I hope we'll see you again on the
to.
Writer's Block. And I wish you the best with the book. All right? Okay, that was W.B. Garvey sitting with us on the Writer's Block, talking about his book, Panama Fever, Digging Down Gold Mountain. I like the subtitle. We'll see you next time. This is Garfield Ellis signing out. Bye.
So what brings you up here to Cologne? He was about to answer, then promptly choked on his gulp of rum. You know how it goes, he said, coughing while trying to hide his embarrassment. The work, it keep getting harder, but the money, it keep getting smaller.